The issues affecting you. Revealed, explained, discussed. Now on WGAL8 In Focus.
Hello, I'm Susan Shapiro. It's almost like going without a raise for more than a decade. State funding for traumatic brain injury service providers in Pennsylvania has been stagnant for 13 years. Those providers offer services for tens of thousands of people who suffer a brain injury caused by an external force. The Pennsylvania Department of Human Services Office of Long-Term Living released its 2025 Home and Community-Based Services Rate and Wage Study, saying that residential rehabilitation, which traumatic brain injury care falls under, is underfunded by 44%. Advocates are calling for an increase, fearing that the system will collapse, leaving tens of thousands without critical care. Tonight, we talk with a lawmaker, a service provider, and a woman whose adult son suffered a traumatic brain injury as a child. We're putting traumatic brain injury funding in focus. Joining us now is State Senator Tim Carney, who represents parts of Delaware County. Thanks so much for being on the program.
My pleasure, Susan.
How did you become interested in this particular issue and as a member of this caucus?
Well, it's an interesting because, traumatic brain injuries are the things that most people just don't think about. It's things that sort of make people uncomfortable in some ways. And so it was not really high on my on my radar when I first came into office. But soon after I got elected, we had a constituent who came in for services, and he was hard to deal with. He was confusing. He was was asking for help, but was quite frankly pretty rude about it, and was he was angry, you could tell. And it was we found out later that he had been to several other offices and had not been able people hadn't been able to help him because people didn't quite understand what was going on. And some of the conversations we had with him and with some other advocates, we really figured out that he had suffered a traumatic brain injury and had never really gone through the process of trying to deal with it, to heal himself. So it was quite satisfying because we were able to help him get to a point where he got the help that he needed. And now, before he couldn't hold a job, now he's employed, now he's not rude or angry anymore, and and we still hear from him occasionally over time. So that really got me to really understand what traumatic brain injuries, what effect they really do have on our society, and how it's a thing that, like I said, we never really focus on it unless it affects you personally.
Sure, or unless you have a family member or someone that has suffered a traumatic brain injury. Many of the advocates say that the state has not funded this enough or not increased funding enough. How do you react to that?
Well, I would agree with it. I think obviously we have many difficult choices about which kinds of things to fund. I always point out the fact that traumatic brain injury could happen to anybody, right? And often does. People are living their lives and they're comfortable, everything's good, everything's happy, whatever, and then a car accident, a bicycle accident, falling down the stairs, something happens where that kind of a traumatic brain injury occurs, and then everything changes. And people can't function the way that they always did before. So that becomes very difficult for that person, obviously, but difficult for that person's circle, for that person's family, for all those kinds of things. So we really do need to fund the kinds of services that can help these people really recover, because if the goal is to really strengthen and build our society through our various programs, and this is one that makes sense to me in many ways.
So why hasn't the funding increased?
Well, I think it's because there's always difficult things in terms of what we fund. Pennsylvania has really tried to keep a lid on spending as much as possible. In Harrisburg, there's you always hear, we're not going to raise taxes, and that's the sort of a mantra in a lot of ways. So we tend to flat fund everything, give them the money that they got last year, sort of thing, without acknowledging the fact that that's actually a cut because of things like inflation and that much more expensive things are, or whatever.
So what do you foresee happening in this budget?
Well, this budget is going to be very difficult right now. I think the fact that we don't really quite understand what the federal government's going to do with the bill that's now pending in the Senate. If that goes through the way it's written right now, then there's a very good chance we're looking at a $10 billion hole in our budget.
And do you foresee that affecting this particular issue?
Because that money that the feds would be holding back is all money that used to go for DHS services, for health and human services. So it's everything from food assistance to special education to anything dealing with Medicaid.
So what do you advocate for people who may be sufferers or have family members? What should they do in terms of going to the state and trying to seek services?
Well, I think the first place they need to do is talk to the folks who are actually doing the work. And there is I don't have it off the top of my head, but there is like an 800 number, kind of a call in that you can start the process and start the conversations with people. And there are groups that meet and talk and try to figure out sort of ways forward and ways to kind of keep advancing. So I think the first thing, if someone is, either knows somebody or has a traumatic brain injury, seek that help first. And then once you get that, then you can sort of get into the advocacy level and let people know. So we'll, at least once a year, there are advocates up on the Hill who come visit offices and make people aware, because the way we started, it's very often something that nobody thinks about or that nobody really considers as that happens to somebody else.
Right. Well, you don't sound terribly optimistic about the funding increasing in this budget.
Well, we're going to advocate for it, and we're going to try to get at least some sort of bump up to it. But there's, quite frankly, there's a lot of horse trading that goes on at this point, and we are in June, and it's
we're getting close.
Hopefully, we're getting close. Yes.
All right. Well, Senator Carney, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, you're quite welcome.
And coming up on WGAL8 in Focus, we'll talk with the president of a group advocating for more funding.
This is WGAL8 in Focus, coverage you can count on.
Joining us now is Richard Edley, the president and CEO of Rehabilitation and Community Providers Association. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
What is the association?
Well, the association is a large and diverse organization that represents providers of human services. Actually, over 400 agencies and organizations across 9 divisions of health and human services. Things like mental health, substance abuse, intellectual disabilities, and autism. And what we're talking about today, brain injury providers.
Were you surprised that the state itself said that the underfunding was at 44%?
Well, not surprised, but actually in some ways pleased. We've been saying to legislators and the administration for years about the chronic underfunding of these services for people with intense needs. And when the state came out with their own study saying, yes, these residential services, community group homes for people with need, are about 44% under cost and being underfunded. We said, exactly, that's what we've been saying.
How did it get to that point?
Well, it's been over a decade since these providers have seen any significant increase. And I really think it's for a couple of reasons. One is that while we see the numbers as very large, 80 million being spent on residential services, the need for an additional 30 million, 13 from state, 17 from federal, that's a lot of money. These same lawmakers are dealing with billions of dollars. So it almost seems like, well, we'll get to that later. The second thing is I think we often focus on services that we understand personally. And as important as brain injury is, and how important it is to help these individuals and families, not everyone is touched by it. So it's really getting the attention of both the administration and the legislators to say, we can't overlook it again. This is too important.
Yeah, unless you have someone you know or love that's experienced this, you might not even know exactly what a traumatic brain injury is.
Exactly, or what the needs are, or even understanding, wait, so some of the people need 24/7 care with staffing for things like personal hygiene, to help them in the community, to help with cooking, cleaning, just, to help them function at their highest level. And it's not just keeping people safe, it's actually helping people get better so they can be more independently functioning.
And I imagine the cost of this care has gone up over the years.
Yeah, if you think about no significant increase in 10 years, we all know in 10 years, inflation, cost of living, it's been immense, especially through the COVID years. So how do you staff a home, 24/7 and compete with other industries? Even, we often talk about the fact that maybe a community group home for services like this could pay 14, 15, 16 an hour. Well, how do you compete with a warehouse that's offering 20 an hour with a signing bonus, no overtime? It's very difficult. You have to be really committed.
Yeah, and I imagine these facilities are very important to some of these folks who are experiencing traumatic brain injury.
Very much so. And there's all sorts of services that these providers offer, residential being one, the 24/7. There's also home and community services, in-home services, therapies. We knew that if we're going to get any increase, we had to at least focus the S. So this year, we're really focused on the community group homes. That's not to say all those other services aren't underfunded either. But that 44% we were talking about, the state study, that was around residential services. And it is important. And, these homes really look like any other home in the community. This is not some kind of institution we're trying to fund. These are people living in their own homes. It's just they need help.
And how effective are those facilities?
Oh, immensely. It allows people to live at their highest level of functioning, to get out in the community every day. Could also be employed with assistance and those kinds of things. So without it, what happens to people? We talk about 10 years of underfunding. If you don't fund these services, the need just doesn't disappear. What happens is these people end up in emergency rooms, inappropriately hospitalized, nursing homes, prisons, or at home with family members just trying desperately to care for them when we know there's services available, just not funded.
It ends up being costly in one way or the other.
That's right. If you really look at the cost of the system, if people end up in nursing homes or in prison systems or things like that, not only is it horrible for the individual, and we should never allow that, but yeah, the whole system is costing.
Well, thanks so much. We appreciate your time.
Coming up on WGAL8 in Focus, we'll talk with a man who works with people with traumatic brain injuries.
This is WGAL8 in Focus, coverage you can count on.
Joining us now is Jack Poplar, the Chief Innovation and Advocacy Officer at Success Rehabilitation in Lancaster. And what is Success Rehabilitation?
Well, Success Rehabilitation is a program that serves people post-hospital. We're called a post-acute neuro-rehab program. That means if a person has an acquired brain injury, they go to the hospital, they get treatment and care, then they're discharged. The reality is that most people with brain injuries need longer-term care post-hospital. The hospital gets them to a certain point, walking and talking. The post-acute programs help them really function better day to day.
And for some, is it a lifetime of care?
For some people, it's a lifetime. For some people, it's 6 months to a year. But most people with severe injuries, it's going to be a lifetime.
Do you think people misunderstand traumatic brain injury?
Yeah, I don't think people understand that traumatic brain injury includes mild injuries such as concussions to real severe injuries that really impact on a person's ability to function day to day. And that can be from a trauma, from a car accident, from a fall, or it could be a stroke, or a bleed, or post-cancer, et cetera. So there's many causes of an injury. And I would say that most families probably have experience with someone they know that has had a brain injury.
They just don't think about it unless you're affected directly. Yeah. How has this lack of funding or underfunding affected your organization?
Well, the rates that we receive through the state are 13 years old. So it's very difficult for a provider to provide services at rates that are that old. So it's tough to keep up with competitive wages. It's tough to keep up with purchasing equipment, supplies, getting your therapists in and covered. So we struggle with that. And Acadia, which was purchased by Success, decided that we need to connect with another provider in order to survive. So the impact for us was connect with another big provider. But we're fortunate, though, that Acadia has stayed sort of as an independent entity, and we have this kind of service in Lancaster, which most places don't.
And obviously, as you alluded to, the costs have gone up for this type
and the costs have gone up
program.
Particularly post-COVID, the cost has gone way up. So your typical cost of living adjustments were off the charts during COVID and post-COVID. So it's really difficult to compete. Yeah.
With people going out there for other jobs. Yeah. And why do you think it is successful for some people, and why does it work?
Well, I think it's really important for people to get this kind of care because we like to say that we help them understand who they are now, accept who they are, and then manage who they are now. That's what we do in rehab. So it's really, if you understand sort of you've had this injury and we can help you accept that, and then here's some strategies that you can use to manage your limitations and exploit your strengths. That's what we do. And that's what we do. And that really helps improve the quality of that person's life. And quality of life is really important.
Yep. And I imagine a lot of training goes into this that's even required by the state, isn't it?
Yeah, there's a lot of training, there's a lot of expertise. This is a population that presents with some real challenges because their impairments are physical, cognitive, psychosocial, and behavioral. So those spheres of functionality are impaired. So if a person has trouble with cognition, it means their ability to think, plan, organize, follow through is impaired. Problem solve, make decisions, etc. If the person has a physical problem, it might be a left side neglect or weakness. It might be difficulty walking, etc. It might be headaches.
And it more often happens to younger people, doesn't it?
Well, interesting. That's a good question. Used to. It used to be 18 and 24-year-olds, and it used to be motor vehicle accidents. Now, within the last 8 to 10 years, it's 1 to 4, 65 plus. So that has shifted. It has shifted largely because we have, I think, safer and better vehicles, better laws, and people are living longer. So older folks are living longer on medications, they trip, they fall, they hit their head, et cetera. So that paradigm has really shifted over the last 10 years or so. We still see a lot of younger individuals, but there's more individuals at that 1 to 4 and 65 plus. So.
Well, thank you so much. We
You're
appreciate
welcome.
you being here. Coming up on WGAL8 in Focus, we'll speak with a mother whose child suffered a traumatic brain injury.
This is WGAL8 in Focus. Coverage you can count on.
Joining us now, along with Jack Poplar, is Ellie Lacasse of Lancaster, and she's the parent of an adult who suffered a traumatic brain injury as a child. Thank you so much for being here. Tell me what happened to Ben.
Ben was playing when he was 8 and in a situation where there was no oxygen and had a brain injury, damage to parts of his brain because of the lack of oxygen. He was in Hershey and rehabilitation for about a year, and then he came home, but he continues to this day to have brain problems, planning problems, and requires supervision almost all the time.
So he wouldn't be able to live on his own?
No. Couldn't plan a meal, might not be safe, you can't count on the fact that he'd remember to walk away from a fire. He might try to put it out. It's they call it the executive skills, thinking and planning ahead, and he doesn't do any big time mental stuff. He's a very happy person. He sings in a choir, but he needs supervision.
So how much does this program help someone like this?
Well, it provides the opportunity to learn and grow as a person, and it enhances the quality of life. Ben's able to connect with other people. He's able to do activities during the day. He's able to get out in the community, integrate in the community. He's able to really have a pretty high quality life. And without this program, he would be in an institution or in a nursing facility and not getting the kind of care they really would deserve. So
And you certainly would have difficulty caring for him at home, I imagine.
Yeah, it's very difficult. And he has friends there. It's his home. He
likes it. He's
he
enjoying
likes it. He has company, and he's treated with respect. And the fact that he can't do this or can't do that is understood and not made fun of, and they help him work around the things that he cannot do.
What's your reaction when you hear that this is so underfunded?
I was horrified when I heard 13 years, because many of the staff, probably all of them, have some kind of special brain injury training, and they're occupational therapists or physical therapists. It's highly trained staff. It's not just anybody that can stay overnight in a house with brain injured people. So it's as great a life as there could be for someone with his limitations.
What would you say to lawmakers who are considering this in the budget?
Raise that money. The staff people and the other people in the brain injury, they work so hard, and it's work that isn't public. It's not like putting on an opera or something, and yet they're in 24-hour care of patients, and they do it with love, and they do it with, they invent tactics if they don't have one already. And there's no substitute for making a life for someone who's had this kind of a change.
Not the life you imagine for Ben.
No.
And as she mentioned, he has a life, and these folks are highly trained, which we talked about, that in itself is costly.
Yeah, it really gives a platform for the person to grow. There may be limitations, but we exploit their strengths, and they're allowed to grow and connect and have a quality of life that they would not have had before.
And as I said to Ellie, what are you saying to lawmakers?
Please. We really need adjustment to the rates in order to continue providing the care we provide. In Lancaster County, we're the only program that does this. You have to go to Pittsburgh or Erie or other places. So we really want the programs to stay. And there are 13 in Pennsylvania right now, and we want them to stay.
And you once had a lot more than 13.
And we had 26 when I first started 30-some years ago. Now we're down to 13. And we're losing some programs as we speak because the rates have not been adjusted and people can't provide the care because the costs have gone up. So we really need an adjustment so that we can continue to do the stuff that we really love to do, you know.
And
as simple as that, right?
So important, not only for the person with the brain injury, but for their family. And
Right, it
friends as
enables
well.
you to visit Ben because he's
yeah.
close in Lancaster. And
Yeah.
you wouldn't have to go to Pittsburgh or somewhere
Right.
else.
No, and he can come home for a special event or.
Yeah.
Well, thank you both. We
You're
appreciate it.
welcome. Thanks.
Before we leave you tonight, we want to update you on a previous WGAL8 In Focus episode, which featured 5-year-old Colton Kiss. He's dealing with a brain injury. During his birthday month in March, he raised money for Children's Hospital of Philadelphia to give back to children like him. He presented his check in May for $2,500 to his doctor, Dr. Sanika Agarwal. She can use the money for funding and research. Thank you for joining us for WGAL8 In Focus. For all of us at WGAL, I'm Susan Shapiro. And join us again next Saturday night at 7 o'clock for WGAL8 In Focus, right after NBC Nightly News. And you can watch each episode of In Focus, plus WGAL's latest newscasts, original programming, and more. Just download the Very Local app and stream for free on Roku and Amazon Fire TV.